I hope I see the clock from here so that we don't get too excited about our time together. I know some of you might have a golf game with family, and of course, I know I'm looking forward to lunch with my son who's here this morning. Alex, can you stand? This is my wonderful, intelligent, amazing, good-looking son. He's my buddy. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 1 through 11. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Zoko and Azekah in Ephes-dammim. And Saul and the Israelites gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and formed ranks against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley between them. And there came out of the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in its span, about 10 feet tall. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with coat of mail, or a coat of armor. The weight of the coat, that is the armor, was 5,000 shekels of bronze. Oh, that's about 126 pounds. He had greaves, in other words, shin guards, of bronze on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, about 15 pounds. And his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man among yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "Today I defy ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we might fight together." And when Saul and all of Israel heard the words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and afraid. I love this story because it is one of those stories in the Bible that gives us an example of the importance of reading the Bible from the eyes of, hopefully, the original writers. And that's really tough for us modern folks. But if we could only read it from the eyes or the perspective of the original writer or compiler or redactor, it really would be helpful. And one of the things that scholars teach us about this particular story is that it is a version of a story of a young man named David, a little kid, who eventually becomes a great king, the second king of the people of Israel. So it's really a variation of a legend around this young man named David. Did it exactly happen the way it's written? Scholars simply cannot say for sure. But you see, I argue that we as readers of the Bible and students in the Bible need not, as I think I've said on more than one occasion, get stuck with the minutiae or the details of the sacred text and the stories in it. Because when we do that, we get all convoluted and confused. And then people end up saying things, you see, the Bible has contradictions. Actually, the Bible doesn't have many contradictions when you read it from the perspective of the original writers. Because a story can have a variety of perspectives. In fact, this particular story has more than one story around who actually killed this great big dude by the name of Goliath. If you read 2 Samuel chapter 21, you will read that it was actually a general in David's army, or Saul's army, who killed Goliath. So don't get stuck with the details, for the devil is in the details. Focus on what's the message behind the writer, the redactor, the one who compiled, the one that, or the community that God used to bring us truth to bear and principles to live by and good news of God's amazing grace. Focus on that. Don't focus on the details. Are you with me? Okay. Here's the story. You know it. You've heard it since your Sunday school days. Little guy goes to where the army is ready to fight against this other army of the Philistines. Strong warriors known as big men. And it's possible they weren't really 10 feet tall, but that's the way the ancient world understood its world and insulated itself to bring good news about a story, to lift up the life of an important character. And so here he is, little David, before this army, and now this guy comes out of the group after 40 days and begins to speak as a loudmouth, nonsense from his mouth. And David was only there because his father, Jesse, had asked him to deliver some food to his 3 brothers, older brothers who were in the army. He had other brothers who were younger than the 3, David being the youngest. And his dad, Jesse, said, hey, David, I want you to bring some food to your brothers. And by the way, to the commander of the battalion under which your brothers are serving. And as he arrived, he saw these great men of warriors and great armies around him, both the enemy and Israelite. And this Goliath appears, cursing the God of Israel. Send me one among you who can battle with me, who can fight with me, and if I lose, we will serve you. Oh, by the way, but if you lose, not only will you serve me and us, but we will make you slaves. And slaves is not something that Israelites back then wanted to remember. They were once in slavery years ago. They didn't want to repeat that. They didn't care about being slaves. No one cares to be a slave. And slavery is not a pretty picture. He looked at Goliath, took out a slingshot, according to the story, and gently, calmly picked up a stone, put it in the slingshot, aimed, he fired, and hit this big dude on the forehead, and he fell. That's it, that's the story. Well, there's more details to the story, but we don't have the time because it's 10:49. Actually, 10:59. It's a fascinating story. But what's the message for us in the 21st century? As busy body types, busy around our careers and our kids, in our jobs, in our families, in our sports games, in our video games, all of us in this 21st century in which we live. What is the story? Well, the story is this. Who's your Goliath? Who or whom or what do you fear? That's the question that the writer wants to pose before the reader. It's who are you afraid of? As Israel was afraid and dismayed, meaning by that in the original Hebrew, it really suggests that they had lost all hope. In those moments when you feel that you've lost all hope, who do you go to? In those moments when you are fearful about the unknown, you're insecure about the future, you don't know what the possibilities are going to be for you, how do you respond to that moment in life? How do you respond to your fears and your moments of dismay? Don't tell me you've never had them. I have. And everybody in this holy space has had some moment in life in which you've feared and you've been hopeless, even for a moment. Who's your Goliath? Who are your Goliaths? What brings fear and dismay in your heart? Well, I don't know about you, But I've had moments like these. Moments when you're literally diminished of your capacity to believe in the God who says, as the preacher suggested last Sunday, that you are extraordinary. Remember that? Those moments when you're sapped of the energy to believe of your God-given gifts to make things happen. It steals our dreams of success and freedom and hope. Fear, it leads us to numbness and inaction. It makes us believe in it rather than in the power and the strength of God's Holy Spirit in everyday life for those who seek God. So again, I ask this morning, what's your fear-inducing Goliath? Who are your fear-inducing Goliath? Well, I love asking questions because questions hopefully provide some possibilities for an answer or answers to life. So I'm going to send you home in the next 30 seconds before I finish with what I believe are several wonderful ways that we can confront those fears and those Goliaths. And I believe this truly because I've seen them in my own life. I've tried the best I can. I'm not perfect. I fail as Zaida. As my kids. But are there ways, Luis, in which I can confront these fears that I may have? And it doesn't matter whether you are 14 or 114. They will come and they are real. The first thing I want to encourage all of us to do is to put fear in its proper perspective. Remember the story of the Wizard of Oz? And the little old man behind the curtain pulling levers and speaking into a speaker? That was the wizard. Remember that? Everyone from the lion guy to the tin man guy to, what was the name of the young girl? That's the one. Dorothy from Kansas. They thought that this wizard was like, oh my God, he was scary because the sounds he created. And only to discover when they put him in perspective, thanks to, was it Tonto? Oh, Toto? Okay, one of those. Tonto was somebody else. And the little doggy went and pulled the curtain in the corner, remember that? And pulled it away, and all of a sudden it fell, and there's this little old man, the wizard. Put your fears, I put my fears in perspective. Look at my fears from a different angle. Don't always look forward, look at it from a different angle. Maybe sideways, and you'll notice that, things aren't bad after all. Second, find your purpose and live with purpose. People, I have discovered, people who are purposefully driven, who have purpose in life. They're energized by something that brings the most deepened passions of their lives to the fore. Are fearless people. Now, they will have fears. You have had fears, but your purposefulness or living in purposeness, living with purpose in life has made the difference in your life. Show me a person who's constantly fearing everything around them, those things they can't control, and I'll show you someone who's lost purpose for living in a purpose in life. Show me someone who's committed to a mission in their life, and I'll show you a fearless person. Kevin will teach us and will remind us that Kevin did not become the great musician, amazing musician that he is. And the musicians who play with him every Sunday morning and give of their time, they never reached that point until they what? Practiced and practiced and practiced. Prepare and practice. There's no substitute. Great wars, great battles have been won not because of maneuvers, but because the soldier and the sailors and the airmen and women have committed to practice the possibilities of what might happen and prepare and win the battle. And finally, there's no substitution for praying. And when you can't pray no more, you pray a little bit more. And then you trust God and you let God take it from there. Good old-fashioned prayer. Good old-fashioned getting on my knees and saying, Lord, I can't do this on my own. You gotta give me some strength. And making God the center of our lives, not only when we are fearless or fearing something around us, but when we are in need of something greater than any human could ever give us. Anyone could ever give us. Good old-fashioned prayer and trusting in God's promises. And so in that spirit, I bid you with a word of Amen.